Hey guys, this is Melanie. I read a book and I'm going to talk about what I learned. The book I read, I finished it like last week. It was Warbreaker by Sanderson. Super good. I think, if I'm being honest, this is my favorite Sanderson read thus far. I've read Miss Foreign Era 1, Stormlight Archive, and this was my favorite to read. I don't know who said it, but I was on Reddit looking for Warbreaker conversations right after I finished it, and someone said something along the lines of that Warbreaker is their favorite Sanderson book to read and Stormlight Archive is their favorite storyline. And I get that because I think I'm way more invested in Stormlight Archive so far than I am in Warbreaker for a lot of reasons. I've spent more time with those characters than I have with the Warbreaker cast, and I'm just, I'm more invested. So I think it's just easier to immerse yourself in Warbreaker. Not just because of the size, though that does help, but also because, like the world isn't as new and difficult to understand. It's a little more typical without being boring, unoriginal fantasy. And I loved it. Generally, some, just to kind of sum up little pieces of the story, what goes on in it, why you may or may not like it. Of course, he's got a magic system, has to do with colors, and breath being part of your soul. It's hard to explain, but it's a thing. There's political intrigue, gotta be one of my favorite things about it. It's probably why I find it so fascinating. There's a court of gods, political tension between different kingdoms, that kind of thing. And I think if we're talking more themes, it's about new perspective, finding who you are, figuring out who you are, who you're meant to be. Just to talk about what I actually learned. Sanderson does a great job of this, and I talked about this in my last video about Agatha Christie. It's a very mystery-based tool. Helps make you intrigued about something without leaving you completely in the dark. That you can find ways to give the reader all the facts without telling them why the facts are important or what they mean. And sometimes the most arbitrary of things and facts and details can actually become quite important later. Yeah, that's kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about that leads into my second thing that I learned. What happened in this book is at a certain point, Sanderson changed the game. In a way where I was enjoying the book. I really liked it. I was continually telling my husband, like, I love this book, I'm enjoying reading it. And I couldn't quite pinpoint why, but then it was getting to the point where I was like, what's gonna happen? Like, there's a lot of things building up, but I don't see anything exploding quite yet. I knew something had to happen. You have your initial inciting incident, but lots of incidents can incite things, and nothing was really pushing it yet. And then a thing happened, and I was like, oh no, I love this book now. It was not necessarily a positive thing. It was very cool and interesting, and it was the right move to keep me interested for the rest of the story. It makes you want to talk to somebody, it makes you want to think about it. I don't know. I really liked it. But at the same time, I don't think, if we're talking twists, this doesn't need to be an M. Night Shyamalan type twist. It doesn't need to blow your mind. And it didn't necessarily, destroy me and the whole basis of the story. But it did pique my interest. It changed the flavor a little bit, It's it was like the bridge in a song. It wasn't just verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. There was a bridge thrown in there, and I was like, okay, what's happening next? It's gonna end a little differently than I'm expecting. Though I wasn't expecting anything, it just changed the vibe, it changed the game, and Yeah, it's smart. And then, along with that mystery and not knowing things, I think there was a really excellent quote in this book that that Sanderson like explained how reading a magic system can work differently depending on how you write it. Vivenna, one of the main characters, she is trying to understand the magic system called Awakening, but in trying to understand it, in having different people explain it to her, she's becoming frustrated by how confusing it is. Even one of the characters even says the more you begin to understand about it, the more you realize you don't really understand it. But then Sanderson included in the process of her trying to figure out, he said this: Awakening seemed such a vague art, which was odd, considering the number of rules and restrictions it appeared to have. Or maybe it just seemed vague to her because it was so complicated. And that was like, okay, I kind of get his rules for magic systems more. If you don't know, Brandon Sanderson has discussed, you can find this, I think, on his website, his kind of how to write hard magic systems. He tends to write hard magic systems. He kind of explains that in soft magic and how they work and everything. And for me, this really helped me understand him and his magic a little bit better, because he discussed the feelings that I had that magic systems they can be vague. But you can almost tell when an author writes a magic system and they have no idea what they're doing until the character discovers their next magical power and it saves them from a situation, and yay, you know? It can be done poorly, I think. But he does them really well, and I think part of that is he knows what he's writing. I'm not saying you have to be a plotter, but I think by the time you're done with your, like, the structure of your world and the manuscript you're giving to people, if you're writing, it helps to include little, for yourself, structural, skeletal formations of how it works, even if you don't write that in your actual book. The more you tell, the more useful I think it can be, because the characters know what to do. The less you tell, the more mysterious and vague it feels, and it adds a different vibe, a different tension, a different element to it that's really interesting. But I think a mistake that I have made in writing and in planning stories, and mistakes a lot of people make in published work, is that you don't tell a lot about the abilities, and then in a heroic moment, the character, protagonist or not, finds a way to save themselves because they can, because they suddenly discovered this magical ability they had. That isn't really very helpful, I think, to the story, to the reader, because it lowers the stakes. At some point you start to feel like if they're ever in danger, they'll figure it out. Now, it's different where you tell the reader and the characters what abilities they actually have, what magical possibilities there are. And when you do that, you know that when a character is in danger, they might not escape, but they have certain tools to do so. Like, they can, I don't know, they have this magic beam of light, they can cast these spells, they can do this, and they're good to go. They might not always succeed with those things, but if they use those things to win, it just makes sense. That's pretty much it. But I think it's fun if you, not even just for how it functions, but for how the magic system feels and the world feels, to make it vague a little bit, but to never let your characters break those rules that you've created. Sometimes it takes some discovery writing, sometimes you just know how it works and you know how to use it. For me, it's a lot of discovery. It's a lot of writing a scene to figure out what works best, and I don't know. I just hope that I can use what I learn to write, like, reasonable standards for my magic. That is it. That is what I learned from Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker. Fantastic book. I think I'll probably reread it maybe not in the near future, but I can see myself enjoying it again, and I can see myself recommending it to people, including you. So if you are interested in Brandon Sanderson, but you're not really interested in a larger book, if you're like me and you like a little less fight scene and a little more tension and political stuff, relationships, stuff like that, I highly recommend it. I really loved it, and I hope you love it too.